Hello and welcome. Today we are talking about for sale by owners. Let's jump into it. So when I first started, I didn't know anybody in my local market. So I spent a lot of time calling for sale by owners. I think I called for sale by owners for close to a year and a half, and I really only listed 2 properties. One ended up canceling and I didn't sell that listing, and the other one ended up selling right before it expired, and I unfortunately had to cut my commission just to get the listing. Now I was a brand new agent. It wasn't until about a year and a half in, I finally had a breakthrough, probably from all of the learning that took place during that year and a half. I listed 3 for sale by owners in one day. The light bulb went off, my confidence went through the roof, and I said, finally, something is starting to work. The following 12 months, I did 55 transactions, 75% of which were from for sale by owners. Now, I could give you countless success stories of some of my clients that have turned into really successful, great past clients. As an example, I had a for sale by owner client who ended up moving out of town, 2 provinces over, and then I kept them in my database, kept in touch with them. They ended up moving back to my local market, so I sold them a house when they moved back to town, and then a couple years later, they didn't want to live in that neighborhood anymore, so I sold their property and ended up helping them purchase a property in another neighborhood. Here's another example. I called a for sale by owner, had a really great conversation with them. Turned out he was having some sort of surgery, and I knew that he was going to want to sell this property at some point. He ended up taking his property off the market. It was no longer listed for sale by owner, but because I had built good rapport with this person, I put them in my database, kept in touch with them, I think, for close to 2.5 years, until finally they listed their property with me. I sold their house for close to $500,000, and then he referred me to his mom, and I sold his mom's place for $250,000. And then the mom referred me to the neighbor. I sold that house for $200,000. And then the original lead source, he referred me to his daughter and son, and I ended up selling their acreage. And then the daughter and sons referred me to their friends, and I sold their friends' acreage. And then I ended up selling, I think, 2 or 3 condos for that family as well, once they sold properties and purchased with me. So my point is, sometimes you can get a quick, successful result from working with for sale by owners, but no matter what, it always comes down to the relationship. And when you do the right things, and when you're constantly doing the right things, you're gonna be in the right place at the right time more often. So let's dig into the details on how to specifically make this strategy work for you. Now, this here that you can see on my screen is the Mike Ferry for sale by owner script, and I have absolutely no problems giving Mike Ferry the credit for this script. It's the one that I used to successfully list and sell for sale by owners. But what I can honestly say is that I sort of made this script my own. I'm gonna break down how to follow a script so that it doesn't sound scripted, but I'm gonna go through in this particular script how it essentially flows. Now, I'm gonna read it out loud and then tell you a little bit about each phrase in some sense. So the first says, "Hi, this is Chris with eXp Realty. I'm calling about the home for sale. Is this the owner?" Now, that's a great opening line. I transitioned it a little bit to say, "Hi, it's Chris with eXp. I'm a local real estate agent. I'm just calling because I work in the neighborhood quite a bit and I was wondering." And so that kind of gets you through the first and second line, because the second line is, "I'm doing a survey of all the for sale by owners in the area and I was wondering." And what I found was when I told people I'm doing a survey of all the for sale by owners in the area and I was wondering, a lot of times I would get click, people would hang up right away. Nobody wants to be a part of a survey, especially if they know it's a real estate agent calling to ask a bunch of survey questions. So I would just say, "I work in the neighborhood quite a bit and I was wondering, if you sold this home, where would you go next?" Now, that is a very important question because it helps sort of open the conversation, but it also gives you information to let you know what their situation is. And then you say next, "How soon do you have to be there?" And they will say something along 3 months, 1 month, "Oh, we're not in any hurry," whatever the situation may be, which is totally fine. And you move on to the next question. You may or may not ask this next question. "How would you rate your motivation to move on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, that's a little bit forward, but if you're asking the first 2 questions and there's a lot of really great conversation that comes out of it, then you might go ahead and ask the third question if they are forthcoming with information. Now, keep in mind, one thing that I found with following scripts is you need to know your script well enough so that all the script really is a question that helps you lead the conversation towards a sales situation. Otherwise, you're just talking aimlessly, and it keeps you in control of the conversation. But if you constantly have to think about what question you're going to ask next, honest, then you're not truly engaging in the conversation with the buyer or seller. So let's move on to the next question. What methods are you using for marketing your home? This is a really great question because they might be proud of what they're doing, but when you ask them that question, they might not have a really, really good response. And you're just sort of planting that seed to let them think, obviously I'm not doing everything that an agent would do. Even though some of them will say, I'm doing everything you're doing, I'm doing this, and this. They know for sure that there's a whole heck of a lot more than an agent would be doing. And next question, how did you determine your sales price? Now, unless they've already talked to an agent, they've literally just looked at the sales price of other properties in their neighborhood and chosen it based on that, which, as you know, people can list their property for whatever they want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's going to sell for, of course, right? So you're just starting to open their mind to the fact that there is a little bit more that goes into the process than simply putting a for sale sign in the front lawn. And then you ask, are you prepared to adjust your price down when working with a buyer? Now, most people will say yes within reason. Now, this is a really great question because when you ask this, you might say, well, how do you know that you're not leaving money? How do you know that you're not leaving money on the table if you don't have it exposed to the open market? There might be more than one potential buyer that would look at your property, and if you're willing to adjust the price down, you could essentially hire an agent for that same cost, and who knows, maybe even get more money, right? So those are the types of things that I would say just to say, hey, you don't know if you're leaving money on the table. And then you ask, why did you decide to sell yourself rather than list with a real estate agent? Now, this particular question, I didn't always ask these questions in order once I got good at it. This question sometimes, especially if they were trying to rush me through the conversation, I would pop this question right off the bat because I already know what the answer is. And they would say, we're just trying to save the commission. And as soon as they say that, my own sort of one-liner was, well, if I could actually net you the same amount of money in your pocket or more than what you'd be looking at selling it on your own, is there any reason why you wouldn't at least be open to having a conversation about it? And how are they going to answer that question? 9 times out of 10, they're going to be like, well, sure. Or they might say, well, how are you going to actually do that? I don't know. How can I pay a commission and net more money? And then you say, that's exactly why we need to meet. Are you available this afternoon, or would maybe tomorrow be better? And so if you keep going on this script, if you were to list, which agent would you list with? None in mind. Well, they might say, I know a few agents, right? And we'll dig into a little bit of the objections that they often ask in a little bit here. But that gives you an opportunity to, again, open up the conversation. Now, keep in mind, when you ask these questions, what typically happens is they will throw objections at you. And if you're good, that is a huge opportunity. As a matter of fact, when I got good at listing and selling for sale by owners, what I found was I would start digging into the script, but what would happen is they would throw objections at me, and every time they throw an objection at you and you answer it with confidence, with a legitimate answer to the question that they have, you're developing credibility and you're building trust with the potential seller. And so if that's what happens, that's the best case scenario for you when you're making these calls. And then this is a good question. If you were to list, what would you expect the agent to do to get your home sold? Now, this question is really important specifically, especially if this particular for sale by owner was an expired listing in the past. You will see if you call a lot of for sale by owners, some of them had their house on the market with an agent in the past, or maybe they didn't have a good experience with the previous agent that they worked with. So asking them what would they expect the next agent that they decided to work with, what would you expect the agent to do to get your home sold? Because whatever they say, obviously you need to speak to your experience on that topic. And then how much time will you take before you consider interviewing the right agent for the job of selling your home? Now, this is a good question. Again, if they're trying to rush me through the conversation, sometimes I will ask this question a lot quicker, a lot sooner. How much time will you take before you consider interviewing the right agent for the job of selling your home? Now, when you say this, you say the right agent, you point at yourself and think of yourself when you ask this question. You mentally project the thought of interviewing the right agent as if you are the right agent for the job of selling their home. So how much time will you take before you consider hiring the right agent for the job of selling your home? The right agent is me. That's what I'm thinking when I ask this question. And then whatever the question is that they say, it might be say 3 months, they might say 6 months, they might say 1 month. If they say 1 month, I'm going to continue to try to get in the door to talk with these people, to get in person, to develop rapport in person, because that means that they could list at any moment. This week, next week, something goes good, something goes bad. They decide that they want to list their property for sale right away. And you want to make sure that you are the first person they think of when they're ready to do that. If they say 3 to 6 months, whatever the number is that they say, make sure that you put them in your follow-up system for probably half the time that they give you. If they say 3 months, follow up on a monthly basis, or follow up in a month, month and a half. If they say 6 months, follow up in 2 to 3 months, just to keep in touch and make sure that you're front of mind to them. Unless you want to get your foot in the door and go out on the appointment. But for me, I was very very strategic on my time management. If they weren't ready now, it's no different than any other buyer or seller prospect. You got to make sure that they're ready now. Just because they have their house listed for sale by owner doesn't mean that they have a 10 out of 10 motivation, which is the reason why that was one of the questions previously. So what has to happen before you will consider hiring a powerful agent like myself for the job of selling your home? Now, when I first saw this question, I actually was a little troubled and puzzled by this. I was like, powerful agent. First of all, that's cheesy. And second of all, am I actually a powerful agent? So when I practiced these scripts, I had to read that question out loud hundreds of times until I started believing it. And then when you ask the question, you say it with a smile and you almost laugh when you say it, because you're like, what has to happen before you will consider hiring a powerful agent like myself for the job of selling your home? And then if you say it right, they should laugh and say, oh my, a powerful agent. Well, you know what, powerful agent? I'm not sure, but when we certainly do want a powerful agent. Like it almost becomes a talking point, but it's you speaking from confidence, which is what's of utmost important here. And then, of course, if you got all the way to question 13, which is 99% of the time never going to happen unless you're literally reading from the script, which by the way is 100% okay when you're first getting started to read from the script. If you get to question 13 and you say, are you familiar with the techniques that I use to sell homes? You're kidding. Now, here's the funny thing. When I first started using these scripts, I didn't realize that question 13, first of all, is the last question. And if they're not familiar with the techniques that you use to sell homes, that's your opportunity to close. What would be the best time to show you? Either this afternoon around 3 or would tomorrow at 5 be better for you? And so the purpose of all of these questions is to open up opportunities for you to close for an appointment, if that makes sense. So as I'd mentioned, the objections they give you are what is your opportunity to dig further into the conversation. So let's look further into how to handle the common objections that they will give you when you ask the questions here on this script. So I've written these down. Do you have a buyer for my house? Now, the driver personality would very often ask that before I even got into the first question. Do you have a buyer for my house? And if you don't have a quick response, the conversation is over. So my response was, I don't have a specific buyer in mind for your property, but I do know what it's going to take to find a buyer and get them to pay top dollar for your house. And at the end of the day, isn't that what you really want? And you have a confident answer to their question. Now, here's what's critical. Some sales trainers will teach you that you should say, I don't know if I have a buyer because I haven't seen the property yet. And I don't recommend doing that because you might get an appointment to go look at the house. But when you get to the property and say, well, by the way, I want to help you list and sell this property, and they say, well, wait a minute, you said you wanted to come over and see if you might have a buyer for it. Now you're telling me you want to list it? It's like bait and switch tactics. It's a huge turnoff for people. You want to be upfront that you are a strong listing agent, as was in that last question, a powerful agent like myself, right? Or they might say, bring a buyer and we'll pay you a flat fee. And I might ask a question like, have you considered the problem that may create for you? Now, that one line right there, have you considered the problem that might create for you? You could almost say that to almost any objection. Like that is something that you can insert almost anywhere. And they say, well, what do you mean? What problem? Say, first of all, you want to pay commission for me to negotiate against you. Does that make any sense at all? And then I might jump into what I said before. If I could actually net you the same amount of money in your pocket or more, is there any reason why you wouldn't be open to the conversation of potentially hiring me for the job of selling your house? Or you might say, if I can net you a dollar figure that you're happy with, does it really matter how much I get paid? Like at the end of the day, isn't what's most important what you get in your pocket at the end of the day, right? So that's kind of how I would answer that question. And then they say, well, we've sold houses ourselves by owner in the past. Now, this is a similar objection actually to the ones I've written down further down here, which is the market is great and I can sell it on my own, or the market is slow and I can't afford to pay. So if they say I've sold it in my own in the past, my question goes back towards the idea that how do you know that you're not leaving money on the table? So I will gear this response based on how the market is. And I will say something like, as you know, today is a buyer's market and it's a huge mountain to climb even when you get your property up and on the market with an agent fully exposed on MLS. Now, if you're not exposed to the full market and you miss out on a great selling season for your property, can you really afford to miss that opportunity in the market because your property is not fully exposed? What happened in the past is the past. Like, I don't give too much weight on that. It says, yeah, that's great. I've sold dozens and dozens of properties myself as well. But at the end of the day, selling this particular home in this particular market may or may not be a different scenario. Am I right? Okay. And next on the list is, we already know a few agents and we'd probably go with one of them. Now, I might ask, how come you haven't haven't listed with them yet. You haven't listed already. Why didn't you list with them? I mean, or I'd say something like, are you telling me that you already know a few agents, and out of the few agents that you chose, you decided to go with the for sale by owner service instead of one of those agents? Like, you're just trying to instill doubt a little bit, but essentially I want to cover this. There's a big difference between I have an agent and I know an agent. And anytime they say they know more than one agent, they don't have an agent. If they know more than one agent, or we know a few agents, that means they haven't picked who they want to work with. And if they say they have an agent, depending on how they say it, most of the times when they say I have an agent, I'll be like, totally cool, work with that agent. I respect that. I'm not going to try to get in the middle of it. But if you know that that's a smokescreen, I would be like, cool, I was just calling to see if that was me, right? Like, you got to be able to have some fun with this. But if they say they know a few agents, that means they haven't picked an agent. So at the end of the day, are you looking for the best agent to sell your property, or are you just looking to do a friend a favor? Or you say, are you looking for the best? Or you say something like, everybody knows a few agents, but at the end of the day, if you were to hire an agent, aren't you looking for the best person for the job? And then they say, of course. And I say, well, that's exactly why I'm calling. If I could, would you be open to meeting to talk about it, right? If I would, you. Next is, we don't want to pay the commission. And again, I answer a lot of these objections similarly. You don't want to complicate this. Do you want to pay a commission? Hey, I totally respect that. But at the end of the day, if you could actually net the same amount of money in your pocket or more, is there any reason why you wouldn't at least consider it? Well, how are we supposed to do that? Well, how much money have you netted so far, Mr. Seller, right? How much money have you netted so far? And how do you know that you're not leaving money on the table considering it's not exposed to the full market? Even if you were to sell it for asking price, if it's a strong market, how do you know that you wouldn't have competing offers on the table and potentially get more than what you're asking? How do you even know in a hot market that you're listed accurately based on houses prices are volatile and changing all the time on a daily and weekly basis? Here's another one. You are the 10th agent to call me today. I would answer this with humor. I'd be saying, oh my goodness, you're kidding. Tell me about it. I got to work with these people all day, right? And then you're just kind of playing, you're jumping on their side saying, yes, I know agents are calling. I can't believe those agents. And then I might say something is like, you know what's the best way to help stop that from happening? And I just, sometimes you just be abrupt and straight up. Like, if you're building a rapport in your art, if they laugh at the first part, be like, list it with me, and then they can start calling me, right? And then they would laugh, and then you move on, depending on the rapport that you're building in this conversation. And if they say they've had a bad experience with an agent, I might say the same thing. Hey, tell me about it. I got to work with these people all day, right? But don't put too much weight on that and say, hey, you might say something like, one bad apple spoils the bunch, but in every industry there's good and bad people. And so at the end of the day, if you did decide to hire an agent, you want to make sure that you feel 100% confident with the agent's abilities, but also with the agent's track record and who that person is, who that agent is as a person. And then I mentioned a little bit, so if the market is great, I can sell it on my own. Now, how do you know you're not leaving money on the table? And then if the market's slow, can you afford to miss out on a potential selling season testing the market out while the market is slow? It's a huge mountain to climb even when you get it listed. If the market is really strong, you might say, today it's not just about selling your property, it's about selling it well. And it could cost you tens of thousands of dollars if you don't have it fully exposed. And I put a little note on redX. I used to use redX for lead service, so it's definitely worth looking into redX. You can also find forsalebyorner.com or potentially Craigslist, Kijiji, maybe even Facebook, but redX does a really great job of looking at all the different websites to get you leads for people that are listed for sale by owner right now today as well. Other important things to remember when talking to for sale by owners. Never make them wrong and never make them feel stupid. Even if the things that they say, even if nothing they say makes sense, you can either be right or you can be rich. That's what Mike Ferry used to always say. But the truth is, you've got to make them feel important. You've got to make them feel validated, and you don't want them thinking that their efforts are going to waste. Always support them, validate them, and be there for them. And hey, you might want to show up in person at the door, because if they said 10 people called me today, we got 10 phone calls from realtors today, and you'd be like, that's exactly why I wanted to show up at the door. I know that you're getting a ton of phone calls, and I wanted to show you in person how I differentiate myself. I was willing to go through the effort to show up here in person. Plus, it's a lot harder for them to hang up on you or reject you if you show up belly to belly in person. They can see your body language, your facial expressions, your tonality is a lot easier to communicate. It's just a better communication in person. And always show up prepared. Bring your listing presentation documents, bring the actual contract itself, bring all of your sales aids with you, because I'll give you an example. I went to go put up a sold sign one day and I noticed a for sale by owner across the street. And I thought to myself, what a great opportunity. I'm gonna go knock on that for sale by owner's door and let them know I just sold the neighbor's property. I did that. They said, well, hey, thanks for stopping by. And I said, well, have I caught you at a good time? I know it's kind of short notice out of the blue, but I was putting up a sold sign next door. If it's okay, would you be okay to show me around the property? And then when they show me around the property, I start to ask them the questions that are on the script because I've got them all memorized by now. And then by the end of it, because I had the documents and everything with me, they ended up signing a listing right then and there on the spot. So I went to go put on a sold sign, took another listing right then and there, and that property sold within the first week. How cool is that? Here's another good one. Are you hosting open house? If you're not, go show up at for sale by owner open houses. If you're hosting your own open house, you stop in beforehand at the for sale by owner open house, take a look around, have a quick short conversation with them. Don't monopolize all of their time, of course, especially if there's a potential buyer coming in. If there's a potential buyer coming in, do not under any circumstances talk to that potential buyer, and do not let that potential buyer know that you are a real estate agent, because you 100% do not want that for sale by owner, that seller, thinking that you're there to try to pick up clients, buyer clients. You're just there to build rapport with the seller, take a quick look around. Then after you host your open house, and because you did all of the work to promote your open house, and if you want to know how to promote your open house, watch this video next. But you've done all the things, you drove traffic to your open house, and you say, when you follow up with them later that day, how did your open house go? And they say, well, I had one buyer come through, or I had 2 tire kickers come through, or the neighbors stopped by, but they didn't, or nobody stopped in. And then you say, well, that's crazy. We had 15 people come to our open house. It was a great hit. We've got 3 buyers that we picked up as clients, and I already mentioned to them about your property. Did they call you? No? I wonder why. Maybe because they want to be represented by an agent. If I was to such, would you be open to having such conversation? If I would, you. It's another opportunity for you to present your value. Now, be assumptive in your approach. When I started, I didn't have a database. I didn't know anybody in my local market. So what I did was all the for sale by owners in my local market, I treated them like my past client file. Now, what that means is I kept in constant touch with them. I was constantly updating them on the market. I was constantly adding value to them and giving them information for free. That doesn't mean I was servicing them for free. That doesn't mean I was selling their house for them for free. But you won't believe how many for sale by owners I gave information to, and they did sell their house for free by themselves. And maybe they did well in the market. I don't know for sure, but there's a lot of people that I helped literally for free. But you know what? That creates good karma. And at the end of the day, you can't control what's going to happen with that scenario. Obviously, you don't want to give information to them in a sense where they're going to go out and sell it on their own only because of the information. But if they're going to sell it on their own anyways, don't you want to give them market information that could help them negotiate a better price? And if they do that and get that result, isn't that good karma for you? Always do the right thing. Always be the good person, because here's what also happens. Let's say that scenario does take place. They get it under contract. They negotiated a better price. Thank you, Chris. But guess what? The buyer wasn't qualified, which does oftentimes happen with for sale by owners. Or maybe you prepared them for a scenario that a real estate investor tried to pull a fast one, and because you educated them, it didn't happen. My point is that deal might fall apart, and they might come back to you and say, Chris, thank you so much for providing me all that information, and we almost got there, but it didn't happen. We're ready to list our house for sale. Can you help us? It's surprising. Probably 50% of the for sale by owners I listed called me back to list their property for sale, just because I constantly added value to them on a regular basis. It was probably a small percentage of for sale by owners that literally wanted to interview 3 agents. I interviewed Bob, and then I interviewed Chris, and then I interviewed Sally. That was not all of the time. That was probably a small percentage of the time, maybe be 15-20% of the time. When I had the opportunity to build rapport, bingo. There was also a percentage of for sale by owners that I was in the right place at the right time. They just listed it and they said, actually, I don't know why I put it on this for sale by owner. I need an agent. I just didn't know anybody, and thank you for calling. Can you come over and tell me what you do to sell houses? houses and you get the listing right then and there. But sometimes that's just being in the right place at the right time. Just like knocking on the door out, and I sold the neighbor's house and they gave me the listing right there. Just keep doing the right things. There's a certain amount of for sale by owners that no matter what you do, no matter what you say, they would rather lose money than list with an agent. Some people, you just simply can't help them. Some people are just looking to try to save a buck. Some people don't have a lot of equity in the house because maybe they bought when the market was too high. And in those scenarios, you can still offer a ton of value and support and help while you're there with them on the phone. You're going to want to dig up information on that listing while you're talking to them on the phone. Make sure that you know the neighborhoods, what's sold. And you might say, hey, did you see that property that sold around the street? Hey, I saw that it sold for similar to what you're asking, a little bit more, a little bit less. I got so good at this that I wanted to save myself time. Sometimes I would look at the property, I would know that it was priced too high. I would give them a market evaluation over the phone as I go through the script, as I present my value and show how confident I am and how much I know what I'm talking about. They would say, okay, well, I know that we're way out to lunch. Let me at least put it at market value first, and if it doesn't sell in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe we can have a conversation. Guess who was there to follow up a week and a half later to see how things are going? Add value first. And usually though, for sale by owners are listed way too high. By the time they're ready to sell their house seriously, they'll list with you at the right price on the open market. Find a role play partner. Make sure that you are constantly practicing. I always say this, you can practice with a partner, you can practice by yourself, or you can practice on the public. Probably the most important practice is by yourself, because you can take one of those questions on the script or one of your objection handlers and you can read it aloud and chant it aloud as you drive, when you wake up in the morning, whenever it works for you, and so that it naturally rolls off the tongue so that you don't have to think about it, so that it's an automatic response when you're having conversations with buyers and sellers, especially when you knock on the door. Now, granted, that doesn't mean you should practice and not take action. You still need to practice on the public, and it doesn't matter how much you role play and practice with a partner. It's not until you get out there and talk to people in person in real live situations that you're going to get the responses that you need to develop the confidence in real improv situations in real life. But when you practice on the public and then you come back and practice with a partner, you can improve on the scenarios that you just went through. And then when you practice by yourself, you can bring your new confidence to the role play sessions and then also to the in-person scenarios. And you're going to win a lot more when you do all three. You have to do all three. And then I also want to say, make sure that in your office, you have your scripts posted on the wall. I call it your prospecting cockpit, so that you're locked and loaded, so that when somebody says something, you can glance at it and it's just a quick reminder of, oh yes, that's what I say next to that particular objection if they're throwing something at you. So hope this video was helpful. As I mentioned, for sale by owners can be a great lead source. The repetitious boredom is what's going to give you success in this business, especially with for sale by owners. You need to get good at responding to the objections that they give you. But ultimately, if you put in the effort, if you put in the work, you will be in the right place at the right time and you will take listings and you will win. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you on this video next.